welcome to Earth to Rosita, and welcome to the first Night Owl podcasts. Quite excited to get this started. A little bit nervous. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm not really into podcasts, so I've seen very little podcasts in my time. So I'll admit I don't have any idea what I'm doing. I feel like I should have I should have a microphone, and I'm rambling, which is something that I do quite often. So I'm sorry if you get bored with people who ramble, but that's just, if you have been watching my videos for a while, I'm sure that you're used to it by now. But okay, so I had a bit of a hard time picking the topic that I wanted to talk about today, but I think that something that has been really consuming my mind the most is veganism, human supremacy, and problems within the vegan movement, as well as just the general perception of the world of what vegan is. And so there's a lot of things to cover, I feel, when it comes to veganism. I've been vegan for nearly 4 years now, and during this vegan journey where I've embraced the philosophy and understood the philosophy a little bit more, or a lot more, my stance has changed quite a lot when it comes to animal rights, or now I think of it more as animal liberation, and it's just, now that I've dove deeper into the vegan philosophy, I see that it is not just a plant-based diet with boycotting other inherently cruel industries. It is, it's a philosophy, it's a movement, it's a social justice movement, it's a justice movement for non-human animals, with a small sect of it being about human animals, like the rights of the slaughterhouse workers and the issues that they face. Although that is a very, within the vegan movement's unpopular point of view, I believe that intersectionality kind of takes away from the strength of the movement. So I'm not too sure that I agree with intersectionality coming into the vegan movement, but more on that topic as I try to breathe through this. And I don't have a script. I really should probably come up with a script. So I suppose what we have to understand is, what is the vegan philosophy, and not what is veganism. It is not just a diet. It is a movement, a philosophy, a social justice movement, and it is, in its essence, the core value that veganism has is for it to just, for us as a human species, one species on this planet, to change the way in which we view and treat all other animals. So veganism, as per the definition, per the Vegan Society definition, veganism is a philosophy and a way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, and any other purpose, and by extension promotes the development and use of animal-free alternatives. So that was the Vegan Society's definition, and I believe that definition was birthed by Peter Singer. Yes. Peter Singer is an Australian philosopher who lives in Melbourne, actually, so it's a state below mine. So, yeah, but I believe that veganism is not a new concept at all in human history. One of my favorite vegan activists actually pointed out Arabic or Syrian, no, it was a Syrian philosopher, Al-Mari, I believe his name was, who wrote a poem, and this was 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago at least. He wrote a poem entitled, "I No Longer Steal from Nature." And I will actually, so it was Al-Mari, M-A-A-R-R-I. So the poem was, and I'm sure that because it was in Arabic, it sounds a lot better in Arabic than it does in English, because as a person who can speak a different language, it's very difficult to translate certain words to have the exact same meaning or to sound the exact same way in the English language. And some things just sound better in Persian than they ever will in English. So he wrote this poem, "I no longer steal from nature. You are diseased in understanding and religion. Come to me that you may hear something of sound truth. Do not justly eat the water. Do not justly eat fish the water has given up, and do not desire as food the flesh of slaughtered animals, or the white milk of mothers who intended its pure draught for their young, not noble ladies. And do not grieve the unsuspecting birds by taking eggs. For injustice is the worst of crimes. And spare the honey which the bees get industriously from the flowers of fragrant plants, for they did not store it that it might belong to others, nor did they gather it for bounty and gifts. I washed my hands of all this, and wish that I perceived my way before my hair went gray." So, studies in Islamic poetry. So that was written by poet and philosopher Al-Mari. And he was born in 973 AD in Syria, and he died in 1057. So these things go way back and way deeper than most people care to realize. It is not just a new trend that is happening within the Western world. I have a couple of friends in quote-unquote third world nations who are living in poverty and who still, are drawn to the vegan philosophy in a spiritual sense. And I believe that Hinduism is also brings this idea up as well. I believe it's called Amisa, sorry, I'm a little bit ignorant to it because I actually, yeah. Hisa. I probably said that wrong, completely wrong, and I'm sorry if I did. But, ahimsa. That's embarrassing. It's a Sanskrit word. It's a term meaning to do no harm. The word is derived from Sanskrit root hims, to strike. Hinsa is injury or harm. Ahimsa is the opposite of this, i.e. non-harming. This is also translated as non-violence. So, yes, this is an Indian principle. But over the years, I feel like it seems to me that nowhere in the world is really vegan friendly, and there's a lot of maybe cringeworthy debacle about it, but I believe that it's mainly because of our economic structure and the way that the Western world treats their food and treats their resources, and it's capitalism, you know? Capitalism makes everything out into a resource, and that includes everything. So that includes nature, Mother Earth, animals, and humans. So yes, we are a part of a sort of modern day slavery. So yeah, it's very clear to me that this philosophy, this idea of non-harm to animals, keeps popping back up throughout human history. But why doesn't it ever stick? Now, does it really have to do with our current economical system where we have distanced ourselves from, you know, the process of how meat is made? Or does it have to do with the fact that maybe we as a species, we just, it's hard for us to evolve spiritually in a materialistic plane. And there's a lot of things that go into this way of thinking, like what holds the human species back from granting other sentient life and seeing and viewing nature as something that we should respect? What keeps us from this? I believe that there's a lot of things. So the biggest thing, I think, is human supremacy. And human supremacy is something that stems from humans being on an eternal ego trip. Now, I don't know if any of you out there are into spirituality, but a lot of spiritual folks that I've come across see the ego as the enemy. And I'm not one of them as a spiritual person. We're all spiritual beings ultimately, but some are more in tune with this fact than others. Others don't even have faith in God. And, you know, that's okay, because that is their path. That is their, that is how they were brought into this realm to begin with. They want to be more into things that one can see and not things that one can feel. But the ego is a big part of who we are. And we all have an ego intact that is essential for us to be able to exist. Because if we were not intact with our ego, we wouldn't be able to understand separateness, and we wouldn't be able to understand hierarchies, and we wouldn't be able to understand the difference between a plant and the difference between a pig. We wouldn't be able to understand the difference. So that is why I think that the more masculine mind, not the more feminine mind, which the masculine mind is something that thrives off of things that one can see, the rational mind can comprehend. And it categorizes all of these things. We always do this anyway, but it categorizes all of these things. So the masculine mind created science, and science created the hierarchies in which I'm talking about. So, there are two hierarchies when we're considering everything that we see around us. We are intelligent and sentient beings, and that is what we have in common with other animals. But with this rational thinking that the masculine mind, as we live in a masculine dominated world, why is it such a hard thing for the masculine mind, aka the scientific rational mind, to embrace the vegan philosophy if it understands sentience and intelligence resides within other animals, and therefore they should be granted the right to their own bodies, their own bodily autonomy? It is because it is not merged in with the feminine mind. And the feminine mind is the more feeling side to things. We are not in tune with our divine feminine nature. We're more in tune with our wounded feminine nature. And I've spoken about this in tons of other videos before, in bits and pieces, or I've made a whole video dedicated to what is divine feminine, what is divine and wounded feminine energy, and what is divine and wounded masculine energy. But I think that this really ties in well with why this world finds it so difficult to embrace the vegan philosophy. So I just said it, I said it. It is because the masculine energy is not merging well with the feminine energy. They are the only feminine energy we are embracing is the wounded feminine. And the wounded feminine is materialistic. The wounded feminine is let me just thank God I have a laptop in front of me. Wounded feminine traits. Because I can't say it at the top of my head. So the wounded feminine is insecure, manipulative, inauthentic, and plays the victim. So you see these patterns, popping up whenever somebody is being debated, being challenged when it comes to veganism. They turn into like the victim when they're not the victim. They become insecure. They become manipulative. They become inauthentic in their energy. They become inauthentic to the divine feminine that resides in us all. But that is not the divine feminine nature that we should seek. Divine feminine nature is being open. It is being strong. It is intuitive. And intuition is so important when it comes to veganism, because when a feminine energy comes their power, their fullest power, they are more open to everything. Their mind essentially walks toward being empty, for they realize that they know nothing, and that releases another trait within the divine feminine, and that other trait is creativity, and intuition, and all of that open-mindedness that we really need to see more in this world. And I'm not saying that divine feminine energy, just because it's femme, only applies to the vessel of a female body. It like energy resides in us all, and spirituality has created these concepts that are very useful. So it can apply to both man and woman. It's not a competition of sex. It is a competition of what energy the human consciousness decides to reside most in. And it's really unfortunate that for some reason the world has strayed to embracing more of the masculine and feminine traits in a way that works against all other sentient life in a way. It hasn't intentionally worked against all other sentient life. I don't think that the human species meant for it to turn out this way, but I think that it led to this point because people didn't really focus that much on their spiritual awakening or their spiritual side that is ingrained to all of us. I think that this is because masculine energy, deeply present, focused, logical, and a need for stability, it didn't allow, like, all of these things merged together. It creates a reality where, one is only going with the flow, not really thinking, and thinking too much, thinking too logically. That's the problem here. That's where we went wrong. They were thinking of solutions, but they weren't thinking of ways to sit down, quieten the mind. They weren't thinking of ways to improve themselves or improve the world around them. They were just thinking of go, go, go. And they were just thinking of the next step. And they were just thinking of the next invention to make instead of working on the current invention, the current thing. And that is why, like, all of the star signs that are masculine are, they're all associated with this fire and air energy. Fire and air energy is something that just needs to go. It needs to move forward. We are more technologically advanced. That is undeniable. Like, this camera exists because of masculine energy. This television exists because of masculine energy. Everything in this room exists because of the masculine energy. And of course it also has some level of feminine energy, but it never really focused on emotion. It never really focused on understanding boundaries and understanding where to stop. Because we understand boundaries. We are beginning to talk more about boundaries within the human context, but we're not really talking about boundaries within what we can do to other forms of life. I mean, there are still people out there who even torture their pets or torture well-loved animals within a culture. That's not really seeing a boundary of where one needs to stop. That's fire energy, I believe. But here, on this chart that I'm looking at, also, wounded masculine, there's a lot of wounded masculine, which is a scary thing. It's pretty much all of the wounded masculine that coincides with veganism, and coincides with a non-vegan world, and why we have a non-vegan world in this masculine world. It's because we are controlling, aggressive, we withdraw, we avoid, we are too competitive, we are abusive and unstable. So how can we actually reverse this? Well, I think the answer is pretty simple, but the trouble is the answer is get more in touch with who you are as a spirit, and slow down and quieten the mind. Ask yourself questions. Get in touch with a more emotional, deep, open side to you, a vulnerable side to you that is all traits of the divine feminine. If people meditated for a couple of hours every day, or if people listen to music like this that I'm listening to in the background for an hour, or for 3 hours a day, and they would, for 3 hours straight, I'm saying, and they wouldn't be able to, and they restrict themselves to movement. I wonder what people would find within themselves, because these answers that we look for out there can always be found in here if we explore. And that is what divine feminine energy ultimately is. But even if people haven't reached this divine feminine place, then the divine masculine can also suggest why some people that aren't really in touch with their divine feminine energy go vegan. And that is being logical, and being extending that logic out to being there for the animals, and being protective of the animals, and being accountable, and having integrity, and having boundaries, holding boundaries. So ultimately the answer is the answer for the question, why haven't we reached the vegan world, is because we haven't embraced divine feminine energy, and we're more in a wounded masculine energy. Especially in America. America, I believe, is the worst of them all. And also, another phenomenon, or whatever that word is. Ever heard of the the line, "You are what you eat." I actually wonder who came up with that line and what they were talking about. I believe that that line was ultimately just more about weight loss or something like that. That's what I think when I think of that word. But if you think about this a bit more deeply, "you are what you eat," then it opens up doors to why everyone is in a state of wounded masculine. So you are what you eat, or who you eat. So when what you eat becomes who you eat, you're taking, and we already understand just a basic rule that energy never dies. So when the energy of the dead, including animals that are killed, where does that energy go? It goes into our bodies. So when that energy goes into our bodies, one can feel different, whether they can see it consciously or not. Even if they are the most centered and balanced person, there is still something within that energy that blocks them from reaching a higher state. So I don't know, like when I think about that, I don't really know if I believe in that as much as just general human supremacy and this rhetoric that humans have spouted over and over again, you know, that we are the most important people on this planet. I don't really believe in "you are what you eat" as much as I do with the concept of human supremacy and being on an eternal ego trip, and also not embracing the divine feminine or masculine energies, or using the divine feminine and masculine energies to work against other beings. Yeah, I don't really think that that argument really makes very much sense, because like some of the most kind-hearted people are not vegan, but somehow they still have this disconnect. So I don't really buy that now that I think about it a bit more. But it's really interesting concept to think about, the fact that I just had a look at the charts that explains wounded masculine energy, and we are like literally in all of those states when it comes to veganism, and veganism being debated. I mean, controlling, aggressive, withdraws, avoids, too competitive in the sense that they feel a sort of competition toward non-human animals. Like I've gotten the I can't even tell you the amount of times I've gotten the question, well, if you were in a burning building with an animal and a human, a dog and a human, would you save the dog or the human? So this is like, it's coming from a place of competitiveness for the human species over the non-human species, and it's unstable, which is another wounded masculine trait, because it doesn't make any logical sense. It's coming from a place of instability and insecurity, which is a wounded feminine trait. It's not coming from a higher place. So I believe in those two things. I believe in the human supremacy lie that we've been told and we've been fed by religion, by Christianity especially, like Christianity or the Islamic religion. They all say things like God put animals here for us to eat, and it's like these are not coming, these kind of ideas, they're not coming from a higher place, because God doesn't, it doesn't make very much sense why God would put animals onto this earthly plane who have sentience and intelligence, to have consciousness, to understand what's going on around them, in the world around them, and then have one species of animal just, take that one life away from them, but not only just take that one life away from them, subject them to so much torment. So that's more of the like spiritual side to things, but I guess we could talk about the more easier to see side to things. So convenience, consumerism, meat tastes good. So these are stemming from kind of like, oh god, I'm going back into spirituality. I'm sorry, spirituality rules my life, y'all, okay? So I'm about to go on to the big old spiel about the 7 deadly sins. So, 7 deadly sins. I'm actually Googling this. Lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, pride. Okay, I don't really think envy makes any sense in this. And lust, typically when we think of the word lust and wrath, 3 of these don't really apply, although I can think about it, and maybe I can like connect it with the resistance to veganism. So lust. When we think of lust, we think of like something sexual, I think. But what does lust actually even mean? I think strong sexual desire. It can't really be applied, but I suppose it can be applied if we just take the sexual part out of it and just think about lust as a way of wanting something strongly, desiring something strongly. So I guess we can refer to it as that, and wrath, it's a severe case of anger, and the other thing, envy, we are, jealously, or not jealous, but like something along the lines of jealous. But lust, a strong desire for things, not necessarily a strong sexual desire, but a strong desire. So we do have a strong desire to eat the flesh of others. So that also ties into gluttony. Now gluttony is an action where, or a sin, more like a sin, where we just want something without understanding the limits to it. And then greed, obviously greed. This ties into this ties into what we do to animals, because we actually mass breed animals to a point where it's truly unsustainable, and that is a form of greed and gluttony and strong desire, which is lust. And then we're too lazy, sloth, we're too lazy to think about it. So we just remain asleep. And I don't mean literally we go to sleep, we close our eyes, we go to sleep and then go to another consciousness someplace else. We close our eyes. We sleep in the sense that we close our eyes to the truth, the sleeper effect, as psychology calls this. Or we procrastinate. One of the things a loved one has said to me when it comes to veganism is that they'll think about it later, and they'll think about it at a time where, they're less clouded by their ego-driven life, their ego-driven problems. They're so, most people are so that display these 7 deadly sins when it comes to the concept of veganism and connecting veganism and why there's a resistance to veganism. They display these 7 deadly sins perfectly. And then they get angry when they're challenged. So that's wrath, extreme anger for irrational reasons. And I've seen this time and time again, this energy of anger that doesn't really make very much sense, even if you're talking to somebody in the most calm way about veganism and about animal liberation and the concept of animal liberation. At first they seem calm, but then they become angered. They become angered and they're filled with wrath, and I've seen this and I've experienced this time and time again with a wide variety of people. As a vegan activist, I am going to be talking to a lot of people about this. And then, not really anything to do with envy, but that wrath leads to the 6th 7 deadly sin, which is pride. So pride is... How do I explain pride? I have to Google all of this shit. A feeling of deep pleasure or satisfaction derived from one's own achievements. So they have this incessant need to be proven right. And it's like a bottomless pit, because to be proven right is impossible. You can't always be right. You can't always be in a sense of pride for your achievement. You have to learn when you're wrong. And this comes from a place of insecurity, which is interconnected with, the wounded masculine and wounded feminine energy. Wounded feminine energy is insecure. So it's interesting that the religion of Christianity did bring up the 7 deadly sins, but nobody ever really, I don't believe that I've ever seen anybody relay the 7 deadly sins to the resistance of the vegan movement. So I think that it's beneficial to have pointed that out. But it's interesting to me because for Christianity to bring these things up, well, it just makes you wonder, what else has Christianity brought up that is pro veganism? Okay, so I was just looking for the Bible verse about what Christianity claims as what God or Jesus, or because I wasn't raised Christian, so I don't know. But this is the quote that I was looking for. Genesis 1:29. Hebrew, God said, "See, I give you every seed-bearing plant. This is upon all the earth, and every tree that has seed-bearing fruit. They shall be yours for food." Greek, and God said, "Behold, I have given you every seed-bearing grass which is on the earth to produce." Sorry, my camera cut out. So, as I was saying, to produce seed, and every tree which has in itself the fruit of the seed that it has produced, it will be food for you. So, given these, this is Genesis 1.29, but within Christianity even, this has popped up. And so there has always been something in the psyche and the consciousness of the human mind that, is triggering us and making us think about other sentient life. And there have been philosophers who have embraced the idea of veganism. But as I've explained throughout most of this video, most of this podcast, there's a wide range of things that holds the human species back from embracing veganism, the vegan philosophy. And yeah, we just discussed a couple of those things, like the 7 deadly sins, and just a fast-paced lifestyle, and being disconnected from the procedure in which it has to be taken to have these animals end up on your plate, or have your ice cream, or have your eggs. There's a disconnection, but then you go back to hunting, and then I think that hunting is a very interesting case, because hunting is a part of our human history, our hunter-gatherer days. And I think that no matter what, there is something that humans cling onto for this reason, because if you look around us, we are slowly kind of becoming humanoid. I believe that it's a scary thought, but I believe that is the future. We will become humanoids. Most humans act like that anyway. They act like an intelligent species, but they don't feel as much anymore. And they embrace more of their intelligence and more of their technological advanced mind than they do their spiritual growth. They don't really, most humans, because we are living in a fast-paced society now with all this technology, most humans don't value spiritual growth as much. And maybe that is what the future holds for us as a species. Maybe we will become humanoids instead of just simply human animals. But okay, sorry, I'm about to go into a tangent about the robot invasion. So if it's not if it's not someone who is just relying on factory farmed animals, it's got to be the small minority of people, that would rather hunt their food. And yes, hunting was a part of our ancestral diet, and it was a part of our history when it comes to ancestry. Indigenous people cling on to this, Christians cling on to this, Indian people cling on to this. No matter where you are in the world, there is something that people, hold on to so dearly. They're hunter-gatherer days. And I believe it's because they want something. They want to feel connected to the natural world. It's not coming from sometimes it is coming from the evil place when we're talking about poachers, poachers are just doing it for money and profit. They're not doing it for conservation. They're just doing it for profit, and it's very obvious when you look into the details of it all. But the people that hunt for food, I've seen vegan activism where people have shared why they would rather hunt their food, and they say something along the lines of, I want to feel more connected to nature and my food spiritually, And it does sound kind of ridiculous. It is ridiculous because we're not living in that world anymore. We're not living in our ancestral days or our caveman days, or we're not living in a situation. Majority of people that you are surrounded by are not living in that situation. We're just simply not. We have houses. If you have a laptop right now and you're watching this, or if you have a phone right now and you're watching this, you're probably not out in the jungle someplace. You're probably, in a major city, or you're probably somewhere in the working class of a country where you have access to internet. So this idea that they want to feel connected to nature, it comes from our ancestral days, and it comes from a yearning of wanting to go back, to wanting to revert back to a time where things were a lot more simple, which in my research, hunter-gatherer days were not simple at all. We didn't live that long. We didn't hunt. When we hunt, it wasn't always successful, and we would go days without food. And some people even claim, in my research, some people even claim that most of our ancestral diet was plant-based through new research coming through. And you have to be open-minded to understand this, otherwise you're just gonna shut it out. But some scientists are saying that majority of our ancestral diet was plant-based, which is not really that hard to believe, because there's a lot of nutrients in plants that most people, the average person, I don't think, sees as vital or superior to meat nutrients, animal flesh nutrients. But it's just a yearning. It's just a yearning to be connected to old times. But it's not needed anymore, so that's the reason why, and that's my commentary on what I think about that reason why people have an incessant need to hunt. They want to feel connected to their old style traditions, and there's a lot of debacle and like there's a lot of debate about whether or not this is okay, but I firmly stand in my position. If you are not in a survival situation, so if you are not literally about to die, then you have no right taking the life of an animal. But then we get into the nitty-gritty, and the nitty-gritty of this is, even if you were in a survival situation, would it be moral to take the life of an animal? Within the vegan movement, you know, it's a 50-50 thing. Half of the vegans say, you know, there's no data on this, but like half the vegans say, yes, of course it's okay to like kill and eat an animal in order for me to survive. But then there's another percentage, the last percentage, that says no, it's never moral to do so. And honestly, I really hate talking in absolutes, but I would stand in the position of not being, like, even if I was in a survival situation, I would not kill and eat an animal for myself to survive. And the reason why that is because, you know, like, I'm gonna die anyway. So what does it matter if I die starving to death on some secluded area of the world where I couldn't eat plant-based and I had to have like a random pig, like I'd be stranded on an island with a random pig or a random cow. What difference does it make how I die? Like, and let's just entertain this idea. Let's just entertain this idea where, you know, I was stranded on a island with pigs or something. And that is an island, by the way. That is a real place, so don't get it twisted. It's not like a complete made-up place in the world. But let's just say that there was no food on this island and there were just a couple of pigs or just a couple of animals roaming around, rabbits or something, I don't know. What good would it do for me, one human, to kill all of these rabbits for myself to survive on a little bit of fat? I think it would just be better if I just, you know, let starvation kill me. And because first of all, I don't believe death is real because of my own kind of like psychic abilities. I'm sorry, this is going to sound controversial, but I do have psychic abilities, but I'm pretty sure death isn't real. So I would rather starve to death than eat an animal for momentary survival. Because I'd rather hold my moral philosophy intact up until the time I'm, you know, come to my last breath. I mean, that is kind of like, that may seem a little bit cringeworthy, but that's what it means to me. So, yeah. So let's talk about veganism and intersectionality. Now, there's a lot of problems that have recently popped up within the vegan movement, and one that needs addressing, I believe, is intersectionality coming into the movement. Now, from what I remember of what intersectionality is it is a sociological concept created within minority groups who have issues that intersect with each other. So, for example, a Middle Eastern woman experiencing issues with finding work in the Western world, the first world, or something, because of a language barrier or because of, I don't know, like a racist issue or something like that. That is what I think about when I think about intersectionality. I don't think of anything to do with like non-human animals. And I don't actually know who came up with the concept of intersectionality, but I'm going to Google it now. Intersectionality. Who coined the term? Okay, so in 1989, Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality in a paper as a way to help explain the oppression of African American women. Okay, so Crenshaw's term is now the forefront of national conversations about racial justice, identity politics, and policing, and over the years has helped shape legal discussions. Now, this is why I cringe so much that the vegan movement is, bringing intersectionality up within, as a way to, talk about animal rights and animal liberation. When most of the time, they wouldn't ever accept, any comparison being made to non-human animals with human animals. I think that everything has its own place, and for Christ's sake, the animals only have one movement, solely dedicated, or mostly, majority dedicated to them. And I think that it is a result of human supremacy that is making us even debate about intersectionality being brought up into the vegan movement. It is this idea that humans have to be the center, or humans have to be included in every single discussion. Yes, there are slaughterhouse workers that are, minority groups being affected because they're thrown into jobs that nobody else wants to do. And majority of them are minority groups, so they're they're brown, Asian, or African American, or etc., etc. But there is something that can be done for them that has nothing to do with veganism. And I think it's a little bit harder with American politics, but It's not impossible. So if you feel the need to defend those workers that are being abused or that are experiencing problems, then you can start a movement separate to the vegan movement that has nothing to do with the vegan movement. Yes, the slaughterhouse workers are exploited as well, but it doesn't mean that we have to intersect veganism with intersectionality issues. And it's quite offensive to do so if you think about it from both a human perspective and a non-human perspective. Like, we hate the idea of, most people hate the idea of humans being compared to non-human animals. And the irony of it is that this has happened before. Like, somebody, I remember BLM, Black Lives Matter movement, losing their minds over somebody within the vegan movement kind of intersecting or like interconnecting these issues and making an attempt to bridge the gap between all of these issues and then bring them together. Because injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And I suppose like it wasn't really useful because the tensions were running high. But at the same time, I think that it's not really fair to just like accept humans being brought into the vegan movement, but not allowing any connection to be made or prohibiting comparisons to be made of non-human animals to human animals. It's not consistent. Like, for example, like recently, this year, that is, there was some outrage with a vegan activist named James Aspie, who, used the word Holocaust to describe what we're currently doing to factory farmed animals. So there was a lot of outrage because of the word Holocaust, which if you look at the definition, if you actually look at the definition outside of the historical context, Holocaust, noun, number one, destruction or slaughter on a mass scale, especially caused by fire or nuclear war. And then the second definition is a Jewish sacrificial offering that was burned completely on an altar. Now, first of all, this outrage, when you think about it from an objective point of view, it is very ridiculous because the Jewish Holocaust is not the first Holocaust in human history. And second of all, it just goes to show the human supremacy that resides within humans, no matter whether they're vegan or not. We think that it's so offensive to make any form of comparison to non-human injustice, from human injustice to non-human injustice. We are so offended, but at the same time, we are literally the ones paying for these actions to be done onto non-human animals. And they are mass atrocities. This is a mass murder. This is mass exploitation. And it is, by definition, a Holocaust. It's a destruction or slaughter on a mass scale. And it's not we're not specifically talking about the Holocaust. It got people so offended. So that's why intersectionality just doesn't work within this movement, because majority of people do not understand these comparisons being made. And I'm guilty of it too. You know, like just a couple of weeks ago, some guy on Twitter tweeted something along the lines of, Jewish people are paying for a Holocaust. And yeah, I fell into it too. I fell into like, hello, use your brain mode. Like, I couldn't use my brain because I was so offended at first. But then I started questioning, what is this guy saying? What is this guy saying? And then I started thinking about the very specific words that he used. Jewish people are paying for a Holocaust. He wasn't specific enough. And that's what caused outrage, and that's what caused people to be antagonized and not think. But if you focus more on trying to understand what somebody is saying, which is something that especially Gen Z, or people who have been brainwashed by Gen Z, myself included, I just called myself out, so don't come at me. You know, I get offended too, very easily, but then I step back and think. Like, if you question everything, if you question why did you say that, instead of just, you know, trying to school them on why it's wrong to say that, you get a discussion going. And when you get a discussion going, ideas are being thrown around. And when ideas are being thrown around, there's an exchange happening. When words are being exchanged between two people or more than two people, a group of people, then, you know, new ideas are presented, and then you come back to your true self. You have a deeper understanding of where you stand within a situation. When someone is challenging your existing view, at first we are going to get heated because we're so ego-driven. But then when you think about what the crazy vegans are saying, and you can apply this to everything, honestly. You can apply this, like, this is a crucial skill to learn throughout life. But when you listen to things that offend you or challenge you in some way, then you naturally expand instead of having an approach to everything that offends you or challenges you in a manner that you need to tell them what is the right version of reality. Instead of that, try to change it up and actually ask them where they're coming from. I've done this over, like, time and time again. And that's what led me to veganism, an open mind. An open mind is what led me to veganism, is asking why without judgment. I wrote a quote today. I tweeted and wrote a quote on my Instagram today. This is where we're at. We're in North Node Gemini. So if you listen to the words without latching your own judgments onto them, you come back to yourself. And what I meant by that is if you like listen to a person that you don't agree with, or if you read a book, or if you watch a podcast, or if you read an Instagram post, no matter what, like, if you absorb something that doesn't align with your reality, and then you try to come from a place of understanding of their reality, and then sitting with it and meditating with it and soaking it up, you become more of yourself. And that could mean a range of things. Like it could, actually not a range of things, but it could mean predominantly two things, you know? You could either be so moved by this opposing opinion that it changes you, or you could be so, like, you could just not be moved at all and just simply, you know, take it as something that you listen to, but it doesn't resonate with you. Like, for this is something that I always loved to do. I loved to go to, like, conservative people on YouTube, for instance, and I would really intently listen to what they say with an open mind, with no judgment. And, you know, most of their values, I've come to find, you know, they don't align with mine. And it's because their values are outdated and no longer necessary. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't. This is the resistance. This is the resistance to veganism. It's because people are in a state of sleep mode, as the psychological term is. They're in a state of sleep mode, and they are in a state of ego and wounded masculine energy. People who are not in a state of, like, ego, aka higher sense of self-importance, or they're not embracing the 6 deadly sins, all of these things that they were taught are normal, like, oh, animals are here for us to eat. It's nutritious, it's delicious. All of these egocentric viewpoints and ideologies, they melt away because you see something deeper. You see something deeper. You don't see the flesh, you don't see meat anymore. You see the flesh of an animal. You don't see milk or ice cream anymore. You smell the mammalian estrogen of a cow or a goat. So it's like when you allow your ego to melt away, you see things in a more deeper way, you know? You don't just see things at a surface level, which is what majority of people see it as. Like, majority of people, like Ashok Butterfield, see meat as a delicious food, but they're not looking deeper. They're not looking past all the superficial, shallow bullshit that they're attaching these body parts to. And the way that they describe it, the language in which they talk and describe these things that they contribute to, it's so far disconnected from what is actually happening. You know, we are mass breeding animals into existence, and then we're taking away their babies, and we're murdering their babies, and we're murdering the animal. These things, when you describe it like this, it doesn't sit so well when you actually think about it, and when you actually, like, when it actually sinks in. See, this is why people get defensive when us vegan activists say, animal flesh instead of meat. There is something that doesn't sit well with the consciousness of a human being when it's described to them this way, because it's shaking their illusions of their falsely created reality. When we break it, like when we describe their reality in a more real way, their reality is fragile. So that is why they get defensive. That is why they argue. That is why they say, why do you care so much? That is why they say, that is why they have to call it meat, because it's a euphemism. If they didn't call it meat and they just kept on saying animal flesh, animal flesh, animal flesh, something will happen to them. It does affect people to a certain degree, because it's a fragile reality that they've created. Like, they've created this separateness between them and the animals in which they're eating. So that's another reason why people are so resistant, because they don't want their version of reality to be shaken. And so they argue and they make excuses and they say all these harsh things that to their core they don't actually believe. And yeah, there's a lot of reasons. I don't really remember if I dove very deeply into human supremacy, but I just wanted to quickly highlight how much damage human supremacy has actually done. So we already have white supremacy, correct? And white supremacy ties in with things like colonization and, the British European takeover over indigenous lands, and colonialism is tied in with white supremacy, and white supremacy is like a predominantly Christian nation, but it doesn't belong to the white people. It belongs to humans as a whole. Even if white people are the majority within a nation, they are not the only people. So if you can think about if you can think about it like this, a white person coexisting with a black person within, a place like America. These two people share a home. You see, they share a country, they share a continent together. So they have to learn to coexist with each other. And they can't be racist, they can't be discriminatory, they can't be dysfunctional. Otherwise, there's going to be a wide range of problems. There's going to be a power struggle, which is what white supremacy ultimately is. So if you can think about white supremacy in that sort of definition, then you can think about the detrimental effects that human supremacy has. And human supremacy, I believe, is the root of all evil. And I've plastered this all over my social media because I believe in it so vehemently. We learn to oppress humans because we've learned that. By oppressing non-human animals. For example, when a psychologist, in psychology, it is believed that one of the signs to a sociopath is they abuse animals. And so this is a sign of a sociopathic trait, abusing an animal because of the power that the human has. Now, can you think about that on a worldwide scale? and think about the little story I made up about the white person needing to exist with the black person in that continent of America, of the United States of America. Now, human supremacy is similar to this in the sense that we are one species, not just one race, not the white race versus the black race. We are one species with thousands of other species. And we have not been able to coexist with it, which is why there's a lot of damage being done to the planet. Because of human supremacy, because we see ourselves, the human race, the human species, as the center point of this world. Human supremacy is so evil that it not only has created problems such as, the problems that come with factory farming and dairy farming and all of that animal agriculture, all of that nonsense, all of that ridiculous human supremacist code. It's leaked out to climate change, and it's leaked out to wiping out so much of nature, so much of the natural world. We see humans on such an important scale that we've literally obliterated so much of the natural world. That's how deep human supremacy goes. It even extends out to not just non-human animals, but literally the planet in which we live on. So, how has human supremacy affected the animal kingdom? Well, let me just put it to you this way. We have even managed to take away the bodily autonomy and take away the power, overpower some of the most majestic animals on this planet, like bears, tigers, lions, snow leopards, the cat family. The most majestic animals, we have learned to overpower them, and some people might call that superiority, but I call that evil, because there is a limit to what one species should be allowed to do. And that one species should not be allowed to play God. That one species should not be allowed, we've already done it, so it's not really a matter of should not be allowed. I guess we are sort of we have successfully become gods in that sense. But that leads us to being drunk with power, and then that leads us to all the things that I was talking about. The 6 deadly sins, not the 7 deadly sins. The 6 deadly sins, and then it leads to the wounded masculine energy that resides within Earth and radiates throughout all of here. And I'm not gonna lie, some places have it better than others. Australia is not that bad. When you go to Indonesia, it's not that bad. But there is a lot of suffering in the world. And it all comes from human supremacy. And it leaks out into the consciousness of humans, and then humans are horrible to each other because they can't respect the planet, they can't respect non-human animals, and then they can't respect their own man. So we've become drunk with power and we don't know where to stop. So it's all like a ball of suffering has just like shriveled into itself and we don't know where to stop now. And that is why I preach so heavily for the vegan philosophy, because the vegan philosophy is challenging humans to once and for all give their power away and, not give their power away, but give up their power over needing dominion and power. Okay, that came out really weird. To give up their power over needing power. That is the challenge for the human species. To give up their power over to give up their need for needing dominion over all creatures and all of nature. And with that being said, I think that that's all I have to say. I think that I covered a lot. My camera battery charger died out and I have to go replace it. With that being said, I think that that's all that I have to say for this podcast. I have no idea how this turned out, but I hope that it turned out well, and I hope that, you guys enjoyed it, and I have no idea what the hell I'm going to call this podcast. I have recorded podcasts previously. Yeah, so I have a couple of videos where they are quite long. Okay, so I have one on astrology, and then another one with my friend Nina that was podcast 1. So I guess this is podcast 2. No, this is podcast 3, because the first podcast is on the astrology, the dual signs, and then the other one is just having a chat with my friend Nina. So that's podcast number 3. So this is podcast number 3, and yeah, I really hope that you enjoyed Night Owl Podcasts. I hope that you guys enjoyed it enough to subscribe for more. Yeah. Like this video, don't forget to like it, and please share if you enjoyed it, and please leave a comment of all of your thoughts, and subscribe. Did I already say that? Okay. I think I just want to talk now because I don't know how to end this. But yeah, that's all I have, and thank you for tuning in to Night Owl Podcast. Bye guys!